Hello everyone and welcome back to the round 3 recap of the Moja, I always pronounce it incorrectly, Moja Extravaganza 2025, and this was an even more difficult round. So the first round I played against a 1500, then it was a 1600, then a 1700. So the climb, it's really getting to me because games are only getting tougher and tougher as we go along. But I'm not going to waste your time, and I definitely need my sleep, so we can jump straight into today's game. I played the white pieces against Annika Duplessis. For round 3, we had Meripant commentating once again. Thank you so much, Meripant. And I know that I had a lot of positive feedback from the commentary, so she did a stellar job. I'm sure of it. I'll check the VOD later. So I played the white pieces against another woman international master, Annika Duplessis, and I know that she usually comes really well prepared. So I needed to take her out of her comfort zone, and how I was going to do that, I'm not entirely sure. So as a joke, but not really a joke, I took a look at some lines in the Alapin and thought, you know what, if not now, when? And that is usually my approach when it comes to literally everything in my life. Okay, so let's take a look. E4, C5, knight f3, e6, c3. And over here, the line I looked at was knight to f6. And after e5, knight d5, d4, cd, cd, d6. And after knight c3, knight c6, bishop c4, and so on, I took a look at this line quite briefly, thinking, okay, it looks, fine enough. The queen goes to e2. And white has a decent amount of space. White can even, bring the bishop back and try to attack on the king side. But all of that prep went down the drain when we saw this d5 move, which is in fact the main move. I played this a bunch of times online, but nothing recently. So I had to dig into that memory cave that doesn't exist. And the reason why I like bishop e5 check, and why I probably remembered it, is because I wanted to trade the light squared bishop. And it may not look like much right now, because why would you want to trade it? But my idea is to try and get the IQP. So by playing d4 and then taking on c5, that way the pawn on d5 will be isolated, and the best bishop to protect an isolated pawn is a bishop of the same color square. And that is the light squared bishop. So just thinking ahead in that regard, and also this bishop on g4 will be quite annoying, especially if I want to stop this pawn from moving forward at some stage, after d4. I don't want my knight to be restricted. So bishop e5 came to me, and it was a good move because, okay, I also looked at it with the engine, cheated a little bit. I just took it immediately and expected a quick queen takes, but here knight takes was played. So I just castled bishop d6, and I thought, how nice would it be to have both of black's knights be passive. So check, knight e7. This knight ideally wants to be on c6. This knight probably wants to be on f6. So these two knights are not having or reaching the central squares, to their full potential. So I found that, out of the opening phase, even though it doesn't look like I have much in the center, it definitely felt comfortable enough. So d4, taking control of the center here, and we have to note that at no point could black ever push, because I could just take, and the knight would take, and I'd win a pawn. So d4 now, and my plan is always to take on c5 and play against this IQP, try to trade pieces, weaken the pawn, and so on. Bishop to g5, I wanted to provoke f6, which is exactly what happened. And now I can try to get rid of the bishop by playing bishop h4 and bishop g3. And now my opponent made quite a big mistake by playing the move knight to f5. And you can see the evaluation on there. I just turned off the evaluation. The reason for this, because of the simple takes on c5 and if takes, I can just, with an intermezzo, take the pawn on d5. This is hanging. I can capture the knight if I want. So after king h8, I took the bishop, knight takes. This is quite interesting because I was looking at moves like knight to b6, but I actually think that this was, the best approach for black. Now coming back, queen b6, and it's attacking both the pawns on d6 and b2, with the threat of bringing in the rook. Even though I'm up 2 pawns, I have one big problem: the development of my pieces. Where do I put them? And I really am unsure as to whether I can keep these pawns if I need to develop. So I decided to concede at least one of them, because in the case of queen takes b2, I was considering knight to e4, or maybe even just a rook b1 to pick up the pawn. I didn't have to worry too much about a2, because the queen is protecting it. The queen is doing a good job in the center. But I didn't have to worry for very long. Rook a to d8. It's a strong move, but I have knight to e4 now. And now knight e4 covers the c3 pawn, so even after queen takes b2, I will get the pawn back immediately. Alright, so my opponent decided not to take, but rather to double up the rooks on the d-file. I'm pretty sure that there are multiple ways in which I could deal with this, but I somehow could not find the combination that would, end the game sooner. Being in love with sharp positions, tactical positions, sacrifices. You can see my play is a lot more chill these days. So I play b3. You had multiple chances to take it, and you didn't. And probably it was best not to. As poisonous as it looked to my opponent, I was always concerned about the captures on b2. So now I didn't have to worry too much anymore. And my plan is to play c4, c5. So knight to g4. And probably spent a little bit more time than I should have in this position. My initial thought is I could just play here. Unfortunately, I don't know if it is the best. Maybe it is. But the reason being, I didn't like f5 all too much. Because after captures, I know there's probably nothing to worry about, but I didn't want to have to do this to myself. Maybe this was the quick way to win. Maybe there was also knight to e5, which would have just stopped it all. Now my queen feels a little bit misplaced, even if it does look quite strong. I am seeing a lot of ghosts in this game. Maybe it's the fatigue. Alright, so I just brought in my last piece. When in doubt, activate your pieces, or reposition the pieces that are doing nothing. So I just brought in the rook, and after rook to d8, here, again, perhaps I had an opportunity to play something crazy like knight to c5, because I'm always threatening back rank checkmate. I'll give you an example. Knight to c5, rook takes. And believe it or not, I can actually take this, because after rook, okay, let's start with the queen. Queen takes, rook takes, rook takes. There is checkmate on the back rank. And you should never fall for that on a Monday. JK, it's Sunday. You can fall for it if you want. So knight to e5 and c4. I just tried to gradually improve my position. There was a point where I felt like my position had optimally placed pieces. The plan was probably right in front of me, and I just didn't convert when I had the chance to. Ended up giving back 2 of the pawns, spoiler alert. h6. And all my hopes and dreams of a back rank checkmate have now been shattered. So I went ahead, played c5, and just to limit the number of squares the queen can go to, but also connecting my pawns again. This d6 pawn was very lonely for a long time. Queen to b4 and f4, pushing the knight backwards. And here's the position where I felt like I need to find a critical move, and I spent too much time. I thought my idea needed to be rook e7. But then again, there aren't any squares that I quite like for the knight. So one of the moves, and this was the old me coming back, said, take the pawn. Take the pawn. It'll work out. The only issue with taking the pawn was rook f7, and maybe it's still winning. Maybe I missed something here. I think I did, actually. Did I? Ah, no. I can't go here because queen takes check and picks up the queen. Then I'm a rook down. Although, maybe there's another move. Okay, but let's have a dream. We also want dreams. Let's take with the pawn, check, king g8, rook e3 is the plan. We can also play rook e7 and try to checkmate there, because something like this would be quite nice. I think it's just winning, right? Because you're either queening or picking up the knight and queening, so. I chickened out, everyone. I chickened out and decided to play knight to f2, which was probably not the greatest choice in this position, just because my knight was doing such a good job in the center. And there were probably more ways in which I could reposition this knight. I just wanted to block any potential checks, maybe redirect my knight to d3. I would be attacking the queen, I would be defending the pawn, I would be, threatening rook e7. So queen a5. And my opponent kept surprising me with moves I didn't even consider. And that's super important, and why it's so good to have more time on the clock than your opponent, or just a lot and enough time in general, so pacing yourself throughout the game. I had 44 minutes here, my opponent had 14 minutes, so I had time to think. And I thought for a bit and decided to play knight to d3 anyway. And the reason being, I want to protect the pawn, I also want to block any tactics on this file, and I want to play this move, rook to e7, and maybe double up the rooks. But I felt like this plan was a little bit hollow, it didn't feel like enough. But I kept telling myself, put your pieces on good squares, and it doesn't matter. A combination or solution or conversion will come your way. Just put your pieces there and they'll do the rest. So that's a little mantra to follow if you're ever in doubt. That even if you can't calculate all the way through, just keep improving your position bit by bit and watch out for tactics and you're good to go. Queen takes a2, and here was the start of giving back the pawns, which I thought at the time didn't really mean much because my focus was the center and the king side. So while the queen was distracted, I tried to do the most. Rook to e7! And the crowd goes wild. Not really. I'm not doing much there. I am threatening mate, maybe, if I play queen g4. But what I forgot was that after queen takes b3, both attacking the rook, the main defense I was worried about was queen g8. If it wasn't for this queen, so say for instance this queen goes here, I have this move, and there's absolutely nothing my opponent can do but play g5. And after that I go here and I'm threatening the pawn and it's all over. Luckily for my opponent, they have this queen g8 move. So I thought, what's the use of putting a queen on g4 where I'm also not protecting the knight anymore? So let's just double up. Once again, put your pieces on good squares and they'll sort out the rest. And by they, I mean future you. You'll have to calculate later on. Queen to c4, what a great move. Oof, this move annoyed me because it puts pressure on literally all of the pieces and squares that my queen is protecting. And it just demonstrates how overloaded my queen was, in fact. And that is not something that made me very happy. It made me, in fact, very unhappy. So I took the rook, because what I was hoping for here was after, and yes, I play a lot of hope chess, as we all do sometimes. Rook e8 attacking the knight, and I just won the rook. Or the knight. So knight takes is forced, and I put the other rook on e7. Now I think I'm threatening quite a bit. My threats include, and are not limited to, feels like a terms and conditions. Queen to g4 for mate. The knight, of course. And what I expected here was knight f8. After which I would have to come up with some sort of plan. I would probably force the queen to g8. So knight f8, queen g4, queen g8. And then think up a plan. Maybe take on b7, or I think it's still winning. I'm just making my life a lot harder than it could have been. Queen b5, defending the knight, but luckily taking the queen away from the diagonal of that pesky defense of queen g8. So I saw my chance and chickened out instead. No, I wanted to make sure my opponent didn't have any checks on my king, especially if I wanted to implement some sort of idea. a5, pass pawns, must be pushed. Queen to g4, finally the plan of threatening checkmate, and rook g8. While this rook is here, at least I can try to push this pawn on d6, because my pawn is a lot closer to the queening square than my opponent's a5 pawn. So here we go. Queen takes, and I could easily just capture on b7, but instead I play this move, queen to a4. I'll show you why. Queen takes b7 could lead to queen d4. Attacking both of these pawns, I'll have to give one back. A move like rook e8 was something I was also considering, but the reason why I was against it is, again, I think this idea of playing queen d4 or queen d2 attacking this pawn. This pawn is so important because it's the one pawn that's stopping any perpetual check threats. And I didn't know if I had enough time to queen the pawn. So instead, also with my opponent having 2 minutes on the clock and me having 17 minutes, I thought, let's keep things a little bit more simple and just slowly apply pressure, defend the pawn, stop this pawn. It was just a great multi-purpose move. Queen to c3, d7, queen takes, and now after rook e8, I think this is the only move for black to have any hope in this position, because now I might actually be forced to queen. Since the queen is still threatening the pawn, my queen can't really get involved in the promotion process. Queen takes, rook takes, and queen takes. Yes. And here I know that I'm probably still winning, but it's a lot more difficult with a rook versus, queen versus rook situation. I have to avoid any potential fortresses. Right. Luckily, that didn't happen. And after queen c7, can you find the finishing blow? You can pause the video, but I'm going to go right ahead and tell you what the answer is. It is queen to d4. And the reason why it is so great is because I'm threatening queening, I'm threatening even rook takes and then queening, and if rook takes, I just queen the pawn. So this is just showing you the power of a very, very far advanced pawn. It may not look like much until it does. I'm really good at giving advice. Follow for more. No, really. Thank you all for being here. This is round number 3. Tomorrow is round number 4 and 5, so it's going to be a busy and very tiring and difficult day. So here I am trying to maintain the lead, probably with a couple other players on full score. I will see you tomorrow for the recap. It is the second last double round of the tournament. I'll see you tomorrow, everyone. Cheers.